Welcome to the Seller Roundtable e-commerce coaching and business strategies with Andy Arnott and Amy Wees.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And it makes sense why we would want to file them. And with the small fee and everything, it's just a great way to get that date stamp so that when the patent examiner goes to actually review our non-provisional application, they can go back and look at that prior art. That's what I'm fighting right now, is all the prior art that is in, my industry and is around my product. My patent attorney is having to go through and adjust each claim just so, it's like, oh man. So whenever there's a lot of prior art, you want to get your stamp on it right away, get it in there, right? But it's a great way to do that. So can we talk about the difference between design and utility patents? Because many people fear utility patents because they take a long time, right? And they say, okay, I just want to get to market. And with the design patent, it can be approved pretty quickly. And, it's a cheaper process. It's not so involved. And so, what are the main differences? Why should we consider one or the other? And which one is stronger?
Okay. Well, a design patent is for the ornamental design of your product. And so it doesn't include function. It doesn't include what types of materials go into the product. It's really just for the shape of your product. And so a lot of people, when they want to design patent, they might want to say, well, I have magnets in mine. I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. Or, mine does this. I'm like, well, we can't put functional language in a design patent. A design patent is really just a series of figures of a single design, right? And it's just a description of those figures. And it has one claim, the ornamental design for the widget as shown in the figures. That's it. So they're pretty simple. That's why they're typically less costly and, and they get examined more quickly. Now, when you do file a design patent, they are incredibly picky on the figures because those figures have to show very clearly and definitely a particular design. So if there's variations between the figures, that's not going to fly. If they can't really determine the exact shape of that product, you say you only file 3 figures, you're probably not going to get the design patent through because you can't tell the full shape of that product by 3 figures. So, design patents are great in certain situations, especially where the shape of the product, derives some benefit or is the valuable part of the product. So, for example, in my presentations, I'll use, it's called a rockabye mousetrap. So it's a mousetrap. Typically it has a flat wood base, and then you have the spring and the lever and all that stuff. So in this particular design patent, they said, well, I'm going to make the base of my mousetrap curved. So when the mouse gets on it, it's going to start rocking back and forth, and they're going to be off balance, and it's going to make it more likely that they get slammed by the lever there. So, that design patent showed a mousetrap, the proverbial mousetrap is a patent, kind of icon, but it had a rounded, curved base. And so that was a great, so a design patent was a good option for that one. So
got it, because they didn't reinvent the function of the mousetrap.
No, right.
Well, kind of with the rockable base, but they basically, it's the same functionality. It's trapping a mouse, the same spring mechanism, all of that. But they changed the design of it so that it looks different and works different, and the shape of that mattered in the product design. So that's where a design patent was very strong for them. Is there an instance where a design patent is weak and people shouldn't consider using it?
If you have a really complicated, so that was a good one because it's pretty simple. And one other thing about design patents is you can show ancillary parts of the product in dashed lines in your design patent drawing, so that that's anything shown in dashed, evenly spaced dashed lines is not part of the claim dimension. And so whenever I do a design patent, I try to just take as much out and put it in dashed lines and just show the part that is providing the value. So in that case, like with that mousetrap, I would really just show the base, kind of being curved, and then the rest of it I would kind of show in dashed lines because that part isn't really the design of that I'm concerned about. So a bad design patent is one that's a really, really complicated product with lots of different shapes and nooks and crannies, and because it's pretty easy to get around that design. If it's really complicated, and if the shape of it doesn't really give you any value, I'm not sure why you would do a design. So it's either design
so if
patents
your
for me
competitor can just make a different shape, then and the shape solves no function for the product,
right.
then if it solves a function, then it's going to be harder for a competitor to get around because they're going to be like the rockabilly one. They wouldn't be able to just make it square, like a boat bottom or something, because it's the same design essentially, and it wouldn't do them any good. So I love that example. That's really awesome. So what about the time to file a patent? Is there any way, you mentioned a way to speed up the process? How do we do that?
Well, let me finish on what the difference between design.
Oh yeah, sorry.
That was just the first part. So then a utility is a much stronger patent. That was, I think, one of your questions, because a utility patent, you can show multiple embodiments in one patent filing, and you can talk about the functionality. The claim can be to a system, and you can talk about the components and how they interact, and you can, and those kind of the way they interact or the way they're configured with each other can be what makes it unique. You can have component A, B, and C, which is well known in the art, but if you configure them a unique way and you describe that in your claim, you can get that allowed. So a utility patent can be for the article. It can describe the article itself, kind of physically. It can be like a system. You can talk about the physical components and how they interact. It can be to a process of how you make something, or it can be to a method of using something. So there's a lot more options in a utility patent, because you can incorporate all those claims if you want. You can describe it different ways. And so, a utility patent is determined, infringement that is determined by reading the claim and determining whether or not you have each of those elements like we just talked about. So they're much broader and stronger in terms of enforcement than a design patent, right? So, so your next question was, how do we speed things up at the patent office? Well, you can be over 65.
Oh, so old people get pressed. Did you hear that, Andy? We were just talking about getting old. This is great.
Ageism. No, you know what? They deserve it. And honestly, you could just partner, like, I'll call my dad and say, hey, Dad, you want to be on my patent?
Well, you could try it. You're not supposed to do that. I did have a client do that one time and say, well, I just want to add my dad to it. I'm like, well, was he an inventor? And they said, no, but he's over 65. I said, well, you can't do that. So, yeah, the inventorship has to be actually the people.
I always like looking for the hacks.
Right.
So you can be 65, and what else?
You can do
the
track one prioritized examination request. That's $1,050 extra as a micro-entity. Or another option is if you're going to file it internationally, you can file a PCT application first, which stands for the Paris Convention Treaty or Patent Cooperation Treaty. And so what a PCT is, it gives you a ticket to file internationally for up to 30 months from the filing date, your earliest filing date. So say you filed the PCT application first, you'd have 30 months from that standpoint to file in the US or Europe or Canada, wherever else you wanted to file. But if you do file that first, they do what's called an international search and a written opinion on patentability, and they usually do that within 6 months. So
yes, they're fast. They can sometimes help you, right?
Yeah, they can help you a lot, because if you get your written opinion back and they say, hey, we find all claims to meet the requirements for patentability, which is novel, useful, and not obvious, then you can file it in the US with what's called a patent prosecution highway petition, PPH petition. And basically what you do with that petition is you say, hey, the PCT examining authority, in the written opinion said, we think this is allowed, this meets requirements for patentability. So why don't you just allow it too? Basically what you're saying. And so they will examine it in an accelerated fashion in the US, and that PPH program is available in lots of other countries. And then you're much more likely to get an office action really quickly, and a much higher percentage of patents that are filed with a PPH petition are allowed versus the standard less than or around 50% being allowed. So that's another good option. It's a little bit more complicated, but if you definitely are going to file, if you have a product that you definitely want some sort of international patent filings, you might want to do the PCT first, because then you're going to learn something right off the bat, and then you can use that to your advantage in terms of filing back into the US. So I always recommend that for people.
And it also still holds your date too, right? It's still like a filing date thing. And then you've got that 30 months, and then you still have to file within that 30 months. You still have to file in whatever countries you're going to sell in. Right. Whatever countries you plan to, usually it's like import and export countries are really good to file in. And those are going to incur additional costs, and they may have additional filing requirements, but it's a really good option. So cool. What about products? So we talked about some of the different costs. There's various costs, there's various options. And some ways to speed up the process, some different considerations. What about products that cannot be patented? What can't be patented? You have some examples to give us of like what we should not even be thinking about patenting?
Yeah, well, there are some changes in the interpretation of patent law not too long ago. There was a Supreme Court case, Alice versus CLS Bank, and it was a patent, there was a litigation situation around the case, the patent dealt with transfer of funds and things of that nature. So the Supreme Court ended up reviewing this case, and they said, well, we don't think there's any infringement here because we don't even think this is patentable subject matter. You're just talking about transactions and moving things around on a computer. And they wrote up their opinions, and it created this like bomb at the USPTO, because then all of a sudden it's like, well, software generically is not patentable. And at that time, there were lots and lots of app patents. People had these different apps that they want to patent. And for the most part, apps are no longer patentable because if you have a software that deals with, taking in some input through the computer interface, it regurgitates it somehow and spits something else out to you, that is not patentable. That is just algorithms that modify input data. That is not patentable.
Alex, as a creator of software, I'm not happy about that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I think there should be a special class. I think there should be a third class of patents. This is my personal opinion, because these days, exactly like you're saying, is that changed the game in terms of, if I come out with something innovative in terms of on the software front, somebody can just go, oh, cool. I'm going to pretty much either copy it verbatim, write it with my own code, of course, but copy it verbatim, or just steal the idea. So anyway, sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to get that out there.
Yeah, you're right. It really actually was a big problem for people. And I had clients in the situation where I had filed the patents for them on these basically algorithms and computer software type concepts prior to this ruling. And then I had to tell them, well, things changed. Now it's not patentable. So it was really tough for people in my industry trying to explain it to people who didn't understand. But And it's also kind of weird for people who did have issued patents prior to this. And then now they're like, well, if I assert it against somebody, they're just going to take me to the PTAB and say, well, it's not patentable. So you can't sue me for it anymore. So it's really a weird situation. And this ruling happened back in 2000. And so they're still trying to kind of get the USPTO is trying to get their heads around, how, what aspects of computer software are patentable and what aren't. So I can tell you just from my experience, if you have a computer software related concept, if it interfaces with something physical, say, a sensor, or in some cases, even GPS monitoring can be considered a physical thing that's moving around that can make it patentable. But, say it interfaces with a sensor on a process line, and then your software adjusts, something in the process line, then that certainly is still patentable, because you still have physical components that are, outside of the abstract convention. And so also, if you have software that improves the computer itself, like if it's, what's the term for that? It's, you would know as a software developer, it's code, like.
Or say that again.
What would the software that runs a computer, what's that called? That, if it's really.
The operating system, or the boot?
Right. Yeah.
The OS?
Yeah, so the operating system software that, makes it run faster, or provide some sort of new functionality to the computer in terms of what it can do, that's also definitely still patentable. But it's it's all these apps where you just are bringing in data, and spitting something out to somebody on the screen. That's unfortunately not patentable as of now. It could change, not now.
That is frustrating, because that's one of the biggest thing in our inventor circles that we get, is always, oh, I've got this software, I've got this, and it's like, oh man, sorry.
Right.
But the cool thing is with software, if you are offering a really unique service or something, you can at least protect your code, and it's a great way at least to be able to protect your code and still bring something to market. Where if you make a product and you put it out there, it's much easier to reverse engineer, right? Although there's ways for software as well. But so I think we've covered just about everything. We have picked your brain for just about everything here. But I have one more question before Andy takes back over here. When we have a patent pending status, right? So we filed our provisional and we get the notice that it's been filed, and now we're patent pending. Like, what can we do with that? What have you seen people do with that? How do they use that status?
Well, with patent pending, there are requirements from the patent office to put people on notice that you're patent pending, and then once your patent gets issued, to put the public on notice that your product is patented. And if you don't do that, then you can lose rights to some of your damages, because if people don't know that they're infringing, and then how can you say, hey, well, pay me my money for infringing if you didn't go through the steps to inform them. And so with patent pending, you have a priority date set, and as long as you then later file, the proper patents, non-provisionals, or PCTs, or whatever it might be, within the right time frame, that priority date doesn't change. So whatever made you patent pending, if somebody filed on that same thing later, you're good. So that's what patent pending does. It also, and some of my clients have products that are, they're kind of me too-ish, I hate to say it. And so, I'm very straightforward with people. I'm like, the likelihood of you getting a patent on this is very small, very low. And they're like, well, I still want to be patent pending. I'm like, well, then you can file and be patent pending. And in this case, you may want to be patent pending for as long as possible, so that it's a deterrent to competitors from, knocking off your product. And so in those cases, instead of trying to accelerate it, we might want to delay it. So file it as a provisional, wait the full year, then file it as a regular application. And then once you get to examination, which is going to be 2.5 years to 3 years from the date of filing the provisional, that whole prosecution period can be drug out really as long as you want. So you can be patent pending for a long, long time. And maybe that's enough time for you to get out and make a name for yourself in the marketplace and deter competitors from trying to infringe. So that's what patent pending does. Yeah.
Well, Oh, there's that's an interesting use case that I've never heard of before. That's awesome. Going back to the international patents, so I know myself who I have some inventions, I have some CAD designs. I haven't quite gotten to the point where I'm bringing it to market yet. But one of the biggest worries I know for me, and I'm sure for most people listening to this podcast who have some type of patentable or possibly patentable product, the biggest worry is that you somehow publish it or it gets out, and then somebody in China knocks it off immediately and starts producing it. So can you explain a little bit? I know that like in the US, you have the provisional patent, but I know that in some countries, and I believe China, Germany, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but once that product is displayed anywhere, even if you have a patent in the US and you don't have one in those countries, that now it's pretty much open game. I know that I've heard that a lot of people are going direct to China now and getting a patent there because you can get it fairly quickly and cheaply. And then I've also heard Germany is kind of like a hack to get a patent within like 6 months. I guess their patent system moves a lot faster than ours.
Yeah.
How does that work? And any intricacies there, or any kind of hacks that you can use to make sure that the Chinese manufacturers don't see the product and just knock it off immediately.
Well, first of all, I want to comment on what you said about filing in foreign countries if you publicly disclose it. If you publicly disclose your invention prior to filing, in the U.S., you still have 1 year to file, even if it's been publicly disclosed. The problem is if you publicly disclose it, and then somebody else sees your blog or whatever it is you posted online, they can file it, and there's no way for you to track and show that they derived that from seeing your posting. And so, if you file after they do, you're going to be second in the file. You're not going to get the patent. So that it's really not a good idea to publicly disclose before you file, but you can publicly disclose and you still have 1 year to file in the US. And that's, but it's not, I don't advise it. And other countries, Europe and most other countries have what's called an absolute novelty requirement, which means if you publicly disclosed it, you have just waived your rights to file a patent. So if you have a great idea that you think you might down the road want some sort of international patent filings, do not publicly disclose it until you file at least provisional. Yeah. And so, and then your other question.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah, and I think your other question was about filing in foreign countries. My experience with China is that it's not that quick, because a lot of these foreign countries you can file a patent and then you can up to 5 years you can request examination. So if you request examination really quickly, you're right, it's going to be processed pretty quickly. But most of my clients kind of wait a normal amount of time, which I think it ends up being 2 or 3 years from the date of filing in China, because they're really most concerned about the U.S. and they're not wanting to incur additional expenses before they need to in those foreign countries, and they're patent pending in those countries. So it's still something that should and hopefully will turn into a patent. One other thing I did want to mention too is you can file a patent in the U.S. and file a non-publication request, so that it never publishes unless it issues as a patent. And so if you want to be patent pending, but you don't want people to know about your invention, that's an option. And so you could be patent pending for 3-5 years, and you're legally labeling your product as patent pending because it is pending, but nobody can see it. It's not a publicly disclosed document. So, but if you're going to do a non-disclosure request for non-publication, you can't file it internationally. So that's the rule. If you want to file in the US only, you can do the non-publication request. But then, if you do decide later, that you want to file a PCT within a year, you got to rescind that non-publication request. So.
Interesting. So in this case, all around, if you out of the gate, if you think that you're going to go international, you need that international protection, then the PCT is definitely the way to go. It sounds like, just from the get-go.
Well, you can, yeah, and I do think that's the way to go in most situations. You can file provisional first, and then 1 year file PCT. A lot of people do that too. But yeah, I'm with you. I like filing the PCT straight away if their product's pretty well developed and they know they want international protection. Then yeah, go right ahead and do the PCT. Right.
One other quick thing that I'm interested in is because my product, one of my products falls into this category where, somebody takes a product that's, is used for, so maybe I'm just going to throw something out here, even though it won't make sense, but like, a lawnmower, right? Somebody says, oh, a lawnmower's cool, but, I'm going to edit it and put a fan on it instead of a blade. It's going to look a little bit different, and it's going to be a street cleaner, right? It's going to blow dust off the street or something like that. How does that work in terms of, because it's a different, does a change in use case give you a better chance of getting a patent?
Well, sometimes like a method of use claim, if you're using something that's very conventional, but the use is really unique, in that case, you're creating air movement, and maybe that is really unique. But when you're like, wow, we're taking this thing and flipping it upside down and it works great as this other device, that's when you might think, hey, method of using here might be the way to go, because, from an article standpoint, it's kind of the same, or exactly the same components maybe, and arranged the same way. The way it's made is the same. So that's really your kind of final option. In some cases too, you may have developed a unique article, and also it's kind of a totally unique new product that the use has never been done before, right? So in that situation, you'd want to file both an article claim or system claim, and then also a method of use claim, because when you do a method of using claim, you can there's something about getting royalties sooner, because you don't have to put the public on notice, because a method claim, you can't put a label on it. So, if you're really interested in getting, as many dollars as you can from infringers, method of use is also a good idea for that reason.
Awesome. Super interesting. Well, I know I learned a lot today. Amy, anything else that you wanted to ask Alex before we go?
No, I think I learned a lot too. And hopefully this really helps folks search for patents, understand what to do, understand the difference and the benefits of using a patent agent and a patent attorney, and especially know when to ask for help, because that's like always the worst part, is understanding when to invest and ask for that help. So I think you've answered all those questions for us today, Alex, and we thank you so much for being here.
Great. Hey, thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Hey, Alex, one last thing before you go. We always like to ask this. Are you, if you're one of those people who likes to read business books or even inspirational self-help, anything like that, are you, is there anything you're into right now in that realm? Any podcasts, anything you're listening to right now?
I read so much. As soon as I get away from the computer, I go mountain biking.
All right. I like that. Good enough. So let people know how they let people know how they can find you, Alex.
My website is inventiontopatent.com with hyphens between it. And I don't know if you posted up there, but if you put invention to patent into Google, it should be on the first page or second page. And then my email address and my phone number are on there too. So it just pop in the get to the website, and then you can reach me that way. Or I can give my number if you like to.
Well, that's up to you. You might get calls at 3 a.m. because from the international audience.
Oh, well, I do have it's 800-634-0605 if people have questions.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much, Alex. Really appreciate it. Everybody who's joined us live, as usual, thank you guys so much in the Zoom meeting. If you haven't joined us yet, please do so. Every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific, we record this with a live audience, sellerroundtable.com/live. If you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, please do so. If you have the time, please leave a star rating and a review. We really appreciate it. Even if you say we suck, we love that feedback. Reach out anytime to Amy or I if you guys have any suggestions on what you want us to cover. We'd love to hear from you guys, because we want to get you guys the content that you want to hear. And as usual, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time on the Seller Roundtable.
Thanks for tuning in. Join us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for live Q&A and bonus content after the recording at sellerroundtable.com. Sponsored by the ultimate software tool for Amazon sales and growth, sellerseo.com and amazingathome.com.